Good morning. Ann is our South Carolina House Representative in District 12, covering portions of Greenwood and McCormick counties. How are you doing today, Ann?
Doing fine, doing fine.
You're in good health, good spirits?
Pretty much so.
It's been a rough week, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, especially with the events that went on yesterday.
I remember I talked to you earlier this week, and you had expressed concern about there potentially being some drama in D.C. Come the 6th. And now that the 6th has come and gone, and you called that one right. In fact, it may have even been worse than what you imagined.
Much worse, much worse. I couldn't believe what I was seeing yesterday on the TV.
Yeah, I was completely distracted with CNN on the side while I was trying to work. Where are you at the moment?
In the office.
Now, is this your office in Greenwood or your office in Columbia?
In Greenwood.
That's a nice.
That's my grandfather behind me.
I did not know that. I have never been to your office. I must come for a visit sometime. It is absolutely lovely.
Yeah, you should.
So anyhow, what I have asked you to join us today was to talk about what's going to be happening in the upcoming South Carolina legislative session, which I believe starts next Tuesday, January 12th. Is that correct?
It does.
All right. And it goes on until May 13th. For those that may not be as familiar with local politics and state politics, what usually occurs between those two dates?
We do bills, pass bills. The largest thing that we do is the budget, the state budget.
Right.
In that period of time, and normally when we adjourn, sine die on that date, we have to have a balanced budget that the House and the Senate agree upon.
Now, are you in Columbia during that whole time?
Every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Okay. So that's a lot of travel for you then.
Yeah, it is.
Now, one thing I was surprised to see is that there have been almost 600 pieces of legislation pre-filed in the House this year alone for this upcoming session. 600. How are you able to sift through all of that to find the ones that are of particular interest to you, whether you support or want to work against it? How do you go through all that mess?
You have to try to read them. They're given to us ahead of time or whenever they're filed. So you have to try to pick and choose, I guess, the ones that you're interested in. But out of all of that legislation, I think very few of them will make it to the floor.
What does it take for it to make it to the floor to begin with? What type of hoops does it have to run through?
First, it has to be read across the desk and assigned to a full committee. When it gets to that full committee, it has to be assigned to a subcommittee. And it has to go before the subcommittee and then come back before the full committee and then to the House floor.
So if I understand it, and if I understand correctly, a piece of legislation could actually take years before it finds its way to the floor, going back and forth like that. Is that right?
It can in essence take years, but when we have a term, this is the beginning of a term, next year would be the end of a term. So if it doesn't pass by the end of the session next year, it would die. So you would have to refile it and the process would have to start all over again. Of course, before it becomes a bill, if it passes the House, it then has to go to the Senate and start the same process again. So a bill has a long way to go before it actually gets to the governor's desk.
Yes, it does. Now, I looked some things up, and although you are not the primary sponsor of any of these pre-filed legislations this session, you are a co-sponsor on 5 of them. And just for our group, I'm going to list them off. One is about law enforcement officer training on how to properly do warrant executions. Another one prohibiting law enforcement officers from using excess restraint when making an arrest. Removing a provision for citizens' arrests from an existing law that's about impersonating law enforcement officers. Then there's also one about hate crimes, and then also one that decriminalizes a possession of a small amount, 1 ounce or less of marijuana. So those are the 5 that have your name on it. Is there any background you want to give as to why you picked those 5 and whether they have any personal meaning to you?
Well, with the marijuana, our jails and prisons are crowded enough, and I think that you could get a person with a misdemeanor or a minor without them going to jail, because now I don't know whether people realize that it takes a lot to keep an inmate in prison financially. The state or wherever they are, the county or the city would be totally responsible for them while they are incarcerated. And that takes a lot of money. So with a minor little infraction like that, I think that a person could do some probation or do some community service, which is always needed, or it's something that punishment that they could get other than sitting in the jail, and taxpayers paying a whole lot of money for it.
That makes a lot of sense. In the Index Journal earlier this week, you were asked about the bill that you were particularly passionate about. You mentioned it was the hate crimes legislation that you're a co-sponsor of. And for our members, it's H3427. And that's got your name assigned to it, along with a lot of other of your Democratic colleagues have signed on board that legislation. And it's a companion to H3283 that was initially filed by Representative John King from York County. What does a companion piece mean? What does that? How does that work when you have companion legislations that have the same title?
You can have the same bill, same piece of legislation, and usually when it's a companion bill, one bill is in the Senate and one bill is in the House. They may start out at the same time, but they may not end up at the same time. So the possibility of it getting through the process is better if you've got a companion bill, because
Right.
one may travel faster than the other.
Now, in doing some research on that, I saw that Representative Jerry Carter, and he's a Republican from Pickens County, he filed H3420, which also is a hate crimes bill, which I thought was interesting. And reading the language, it seemed very similar to the one you co-sponsored. Were you familiar with the one that the Republican had sponsored by himself?
Oh,
So
okay.
I guess they all go through the same committee. Is that right?
They may not. It depends
No.
on where the speaker assigns the bill. Because sometimes a bill will come across the desk and you may think it would go to one committee and it ends up in another.
Right.
So, and the speaker is the one that assigns every bill that comes across that bill.
Makes me think that the speaker is the busiest person in the legislature then if he or she has to read every single bill to make that determination.
They are.
Mm.
He is.
Well, speaking of committees, what committee are you on and what is it responsible for?
Well, I'm on they call 3M, Medical, Military, and Municipal Affairs. And I chair a subcommittee. And the subcommittee that I chair, we deal mostly with the bills and the laws that govern our doctors, our nurses, sometimes nursing homes. They come through my committee.
You had mentioned that you wanted to talk a little bit more about the Democratic agenda this term. Is there anything that I missed out on that you would like to bring to our attention?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, which is not just on the Democratic agenda, but is on the agenda for all legislators, because it's something that we started last year and it was not complete, and that is to make sure that broadband in this state, everybody is able to have internet. Because when the virus first came around and schools shut down, we lost a lot of students. And when I say lost them, we had absolutely no contact with them at all during that time, because in a lot of the rural areas, there is no internet. So we need to make sure that we have broadband in every part of every county in the state. Also, I would like to see that every student in the state has access to a computer that they can take home. Now, I spoke with the superintendent in Greenwood, District 50, and he told me that with his next shipment of computers that he receives, that every child in District 50 should be able to have a computer that they can take home.
That's great. So are these, both the computers and the internet connection, the rural broadband, are they part of some pre-filed legislation that we should watch, or is it part of a budget process that's separate from that?
Part of it's a budget process, and it was a bill that was pre-filed last year. But with the virus coming along and us not being in session and schools being closed, we didn't get to finish it. So I think that is kind of number one on everybody's list, and also to have our teachers some extra pay. Mm-hmm. So these are things that we did not get to complete last year, but I think hopefully we will get them completed this year. And I'm particularly passionate about the broadband because we lost over 5,000 students in this state. And when I say lost them, it's like they vanished. They didn't have the broadband, they didn't have internet. So all contact was just kind of lost from them because they were not going to school. And we don't need to ever let that happen again, because those children were not getting an education. And I think every child in this state ought to be allowed to have an education, a good education.
I have heard from some of our members concern for your health and safety as you head to Columbia. And you're dealing with a bunch of COVID deniers that might be sitting in your area. How safe are you going to be able to be? Do they have rules and practices set in place to handle the COVID safety and masks, et cetera?
They may have some, but I have my own. So I will social distance. I will always have my mask on, and if I do not feel comfortable sitting in my seat, I will sit up in the balcony.
Good. Well, I've heard you talk, and there's going to be no problem people hearing you from a distance. So yes, you keep that distance and stay safe.
I will just notify the speaker that I will have to do a voice vote because I won't be at my desk, and I'll sit up in the balcony, or I'll sit on the sidelines of the House floor. So I intend to keep my distance and do my best, and I am hoping that at some point in the near future we'll be able to get a vaccine.
Yes.
And one other thing that's very important this year that we will have to do, and that's redistricting. That is very, very important because that makes up the districts that we have. Mm-hmm. And how, I'm not sure at this point how they're going to have to expand or which direction that they will go. But that's not an easy task.
Yeah, when if I understand correctly, that is dependent upon the census data getting completed at the federal level and then disseminated back down to the states and the local level to do that redistricting, right?
Yeah.
Right, and
but
then
it is mandatory that we get it done this year.
Right, and that underscores the whole reason why we were so vocal about people filling out that census information. If you can't be counted, then you may be redistricted out.
That's true.
Yes, and we cannot afford that. Now, if it ends up eliminating one or two Republican congressmen here in South Carolina, I'm not going to cry too hard. But you know what? When it's led by the Republicans, it tends not to work in our favor. So it is going to be something we'll have to watch out for.
Well, yeah, it is, and I'm hopeful that the Democrats that we do have and that will have some say about the redrawing of their districts.
Well, hey, Ann, thank you very, very much for your time. And if it's all right with you, I would love to check in with you at least on a quarterly basis, just
You're
to
welcome.
see. Okay. And if at any time you have an open door, so if you have anything you wish to share or, speak about for a couple minutes, the floor is yours at any time, Ann. You certainly deserve that. All right. Well, Ann, you have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.